The purpose of this video is to introduce you to the sphere and get you used to working with the formulas for surface area and volume of a sphere. First of all, what is it? You can think about a sphere as being a type of ball. The official geometric definition says it's a three-dimensional figure such that all points on the surface are an equal distance away from a point that's called the center. Now, a great circle is the largest circle that we can draw on a sphere. On Earth, the equator is an example of a great circle. The great circle will divide a sphere into two hemispheres. So there's kind of a new vocabulary for you. A hemisphere is going to be half of a sphere. Formulas that you need to be aware of for finding surface area and volume for a sphere are as follows. Surface area is 4 times pi times the square of the radius. Volume is 4/3 times pi times the cube of the radius. Now, a little bit of good news here is that these formulas will be given to you on a formula sheet. You do not need to memorize them. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. Number 1 says find both the surface area and the volume of a sphere whose diameter is 10 meters. Upon reading the problem, the first thing that I notice here is that they've given me the diameter of the sphere, but not the radius. Both of the formulas for finding surface area and volume both deal with the radius. So I might write down right off the bat my radius here is 5, because that's the number that I'll be plugging into the formula. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the surface area. I'll begin by writing down the formula. So 4 times pi times the square of the radius. And then I'm simply going to substitute into the formula the things that I know. At this point, on the right-hand side of my equation, I've got a couple different things going on. I've got the operation of multiplication as well as the exponent of 5. Dear Aunt Sally says I have to do the exponent before I can do the multiplication. So the first thing I'm going to do is take that 5 to the second power. And at this point, I need to make a decision about what to do with that pi, whether I'm going to plug it into my calculator or whether I'm going to leave it out. And in order to make that determination, I'm going to go back into the problem and see if they're asking me at any point to round that value. Since they're not asking me for a rounded answer, I know that I do not need to plug that pi into my calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply the 4 times the 25. And since I have not yet multiplied times the pi stays in my answer. We're finding surface area. Surface area is measured in square units. Our units for this question are in meters. So our total surface area here is either 100 square meters or 100 meters squared. Volume, I'm going to begin exactly the same way I started surface area. It says multiply 4/3 times pi times the cube of the radius. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by plugging in everything that I know. In this particular case, I know the radius is 5. Again, given a choice between doing exponents and multiplication, I need to do exponents first. I'm not told anywhere in the problem what to round to, so I'm going to leave that pi right in my work. Now, I knew that 5 to the third power was 125, but if that was something that you didn't know, you could go plug that into your calculator. So if I want to plug in 5 to the third power, five to the third power is 125. And now at this point in the problem, I've got to go ahead and I've got to once again multiply 4/3 times 125. You should be on your calculator doing these operations the same as I am so that you'll understand how your calculator works when it's time to come back to class and work some of these problems on your own. It's important too that you understand how your calculator works because all calculators are different. So 500 divided by 3. Again, we have not yet multiplied by the pi. So the pi is going to stay in our answer. Volume is measured in cubic units, so the units for this problem will be meters to the third, or cubic meters. Again, it doesn't talk about rounding anywhere in the instructions for this problem, and that's a key indication that is going to tell you that that pi is going to remain in your answer. All right, at this point, if you have questions about number one, or if there's anything that you didn't understand about how I worked through the question or the calculator, put a circle next to it, put a star next to it, write something to remind yourself to ask me when you come back to class. In the meantime, I'm going to flip up to the top of the next page and get ready to tackle the next problem. This one talks about Earth having an equatorial radius of approximately 3,963 miles. It goes on to tell us that approximately 71% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. They want us to find, to the nearest million square miles, the approximate surface area of Earth that is made up of water. All right, so we're talking in this problem surface area. In order to successfully complete this problem, I'm going to need the surface area formula. And like the first problem, I'm going to begin by substituting or plugging into the formula the things that I know. This time, when I punch into my calculator, I'm going to be a little bit more savvy about things. I'm still going to square the 3,963, but then in the same step, I'm going to go right ahead and multiply that times the 4. So again, let me get my calculator out. I want to take the 3,963. I want to square that. And then once I square that, I want to take that answer and multiply it times 4. So I end up with some great big huge long number. At this point in the problem, I have still not yet multiplied by pi, so there's still a pi attached to that number. So let's see, this ended up being 62,821,476, and since I have not yet multiplied by the pi is still in there, and that's the number of square miles in the surface area of Earth. It doesn't want to know what Earth's surface area is, though. It wants to know the surface area of Earth that is water. They also tell us in this problem that 71% of Earth's surface is covered with water. So I know that 71% of this number is represented by water. So I want to take that number and I want to multiply by 71%. So times 71%. And to multiply by 71% using the calculator really means to multiply by the decimal 0.71. So I'm going to take this answer, multiply times 0.71. Now if I want to avoid typing in that 62 million number, I can simply hit Control and then the negative button, and this will bring up the answer from the preceding line. So I want to take that number, I want to multiply times pi, and I want to multiply times 0.71. Now you might be asking yourself at this point why I multiplied by pi here and I did not in the previous problem. Well, notice here that they're asking us to round our answer to the nearest million square miles. Because we're being asked to give a rounded answer, that's like a warning bell going off to us, telling us that we really do need to enter the pi into our calculator. Now looking at what my calculator gave me, I'm really not liking or appreciating this display. It's giving me this 1.40 e to the 8th number. What I'm going to do, or how I'm going to get around that, is I'm going to go into my documents and I'm going to change my settings. So under my document settings, I want to change this display digits from a float 6, which is going to display 6 places, to a float 12. And now I can go in and I can take the preceding answer. So again, I'm going to hit the Control and then the negative button to bring back my preceding answer. And now that looks a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more something like a number that's going to be useful to me in this problem. So I'm going to go back to my note sheet. I'm going to say the surface area here is about 140,125,236.117 square miles. But if I'm looking what I'm asked to do, this wants me to round to the nearest million. So in this number, there's the million spot. That's the place I'm going to round to. So when I look to the digit that follows it, that 1 is going to tell me that I'm going to keep that 0 as 0. So to the nearest million miles, the surface area that's covered with water is 140 million square miles. Again, at this point, if you have questions about what I did in this problem, if you have questions about how to operate the calculator, if you're dealing with a TI-83 or an 84 that functions differently than the NSPIRE, please either circle this question, star it, make a note to ask yourself when you come back to class so that you'll know how these problems work on your calculator. I'm going to move on to the last example. This one deals with volume, but unlike the first example that we did with volume, this question gives us volume. I'm going to go ahead and start by drawing a picture of my sphere. I'm going to write down the formula for volume. And just like the first example, I'm going to substitute in everything that I know. I know that the volume here is 5,000. What I'm trying to find is the radius of this sphere. So in other words, I want to solve this equation for r, or get the r all by itself. Right now, I'm multiplying the r times pi. So to undo a multiply by pi, I'm going to divide both sides by pi. This brings up another good point. Anytime you're asked to round in a problem, as you are in this one, rounding is the last thing that you do. Rounding introduces a certain amount of error into the problem, and if you round too soon, then what you're going to be doing throughout the rest of the problem is multiplying or dividing that amount of error that you introduced into the problem. So we always want to round last. All right, so that got rid of the pi that was attached to the r. Now I need to get rid of the 4/3. I can do this in one of two ways. I can either divide by the fraction 4/3, or I can be a little savvy and a little sophisticated and multiply by its reciprocal, which is 3/4. Either way will get the job done. So these 4's will cancel, these 3's will cancel, I'll be left with r to the 3rd. And then I've got to multiply 3 times 5,000. I know that the denominator of my fraction is going to be 4 times pi. 3 times 5,000 is 15,000. And then to undo cubing the r, I'm going to undo cubing by taking a cube root. And if I take a cube root of the right side, I need to take a cube root of the left side as well. And again, notice that in this problem, they ask us to round to the nearest hundredth. Since we're being asked to round, that's a major indication to us that we're going to need to put this information into our calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and type into my calculator the cube root of 15,000 divided by 4 pi. And to access the cube root, I'm going to go in here to this little menu next to the book. And there's my cube root. So I want the cube root, and now I want a fraction, so I'm going to go ahead and put a fraction in here. Again, if you have a TI-83 or a TI-84, you might need to ask me how that calculator is going to work when you come back to class. So we've got a 15,000 divided by a 4 pi. And I want this to round to the nearest decimal. So before I hit enter, I'm going to hit Control first to tell the calculator that I want this answer displayed as a decimal. If I don't hit Control and then enter, it's going to tell me some kind of crazy, chaotic answer. But again, I want something that I can round to the nearest hundredth. So to the nearest hundredth, there's my hundredth spot. That 7 that follows it tells me that 0 is going to get bumped up to a 1. So 10.61 meters. So the radius here, 10.61 meters. And in the last part of this problem, it tells us to use the answer that we found to find the surface area of the sphere. So we found the radius to be 10.61 meters. Now we're going to go find surface area. So surface area is 4 times pi times r to the second. This is just a matter of plug this into your calculator. And because they're asking us to, in this question, round our answer to the nearest tenth, that's a major indication that we're going to have to go ahead and we're going to have to plug this pi into our calculator. So I'm going to plug this all in one step. I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to enter 4 times pi times 10.61 squared. Now, because all of the numbers that I'm entering in here are in decimal form, I don't have to worry about hitting Control Enter. But if you want to, it's not a bad thing to hit Control Enter just to make sure that you end up with a number that you're going to be able to round to the nearest tenth. This problem says round to the nearest tenth, so there's my tenth spot. I'm going to look at what comes after it. That 2 tells me that the 6 is going to stay a 6. So my answer here for surface area is 14.6 square, and the units that we're working with here are meters. And again, if you have questions about this last problem, either about how the problem itself works or how the calculator works, please leave a little note in the margin so that you'll remember to ask me about it the next time you come to class. Next time you come to class, we're going to spend the class period working on some of these problems that involve volume and surface area of a sphere.